I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband went out of town. They have a teenage daughter. Let's just name her Alyssa. At like 3 a.m., I'm awoken by a weird rustling sound and look out the window to see movement. I saw a boy emerge from the bushes on the side of the house. I saw a bike tossed in the lawn that definitely wasn't ours. My first thought was that this was some sort of burglary. But since he looked young and came through a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide to head home. Didn't want to ruin a teenager's life by calling the cops straight away. So I went out on the porch, flipped the lights on, and said, "Can I help you?" in my classroom voice. The guy looked surprised but not nervous. He was wearing a Letterman style jacket, but once I got a clear view of him in the street lights, he seemed much older than my granddaughter. He looked dirty and more wiry than athletic. He walked up closer to the house and said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Alyssa." I gave him a disapproving stare, hoping he'd realize that he came looking for a girl late at night, and a grumpy old person answered, "It's time to split." I'm thinking what must have happened is Alyssa and her parents were going out of town, and maybe before she knew I'd be staying over, she told a secret older boyfriend to come over. It was late and I was alone with several kids, so I didn't want him coming any closer to the house. I also thought it was weird he came so late and wanted to be sure Alyssa actually wanted to talk to him. So I said, "I'm sorry, who?" He said Alyssa. You know, Alyssa last name, this is her house. I thought he knew her full name. They must at least be friends. I said, "You wait here." He started to walk up and I felt a sick burning in my gut. Instinct kicked in. I yelled, "No, stop, freeze." Then readjusted and said, "You stay right here. This is private property. Don't take another step closer. Wait there." So I go in, and Alyssa is asleep just one room over from where the rustling first occurred. I wake her up and say something to the effect of, "I don't know what the big idea was to have friends over this time of night, but you tell them to go home." She seemed to have no clue what I was talking about. I say, "There's a guy outside waiting for you." Confused, she gets up and goes to the window. She sees him and then goes white as a sheet. "He asked for me?" "Yeah." "But by name?" "Yes." Call the police. I've never seen him in my life." I called 911 immediately, but as I was on the phone with them, Alyssa started tugging at my arm. "He's coming up." I had younger kids in the house to think about, so I kept the door latched and pulled it just enough for the latch and yelled, "I asked my husband and none of us know an Alyssa last name. Leave my property or I'm calling 911. He got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully, the police came pretty quickly, and when he heard sirens, he grabbed the bike and just ran off. I watched where he was running and jumped into the passenger side of a car without headlights or front plates and sped off. The police followed the same direction to which I had pointed them in, but they didn't get him. They advised us to take all her social media details offline, that is, if she was sure she didn't know this person. They also said they had a couple of similar reports recently and they were looking into it. I got a heavy-duty lock and she slept in my room for the remainder of my visit. So to that scraggly man that came up to my porch, let's not meet. This past Monday, my coworkers and I returned to our hotel from a day of work out in the field. Rebecca and I walked to our rooms, and as we stood outside of our rooms, I opened mine and I saw something in the bathroom. I said, "Hello?" Nobody answered. My first instinct was that it was a cleaning lady in there for some reason, and then I saw my bag with my clothes in her hand. I said to my coworker, "There's a woman in my room." Then I asked the woman, "What are you doing with my stuff?" It gets a little fuzzy here because I can't remember everything I said and what she said, but she kept mumbling about how her key still worked, how it still worked, and that's how she got in. I was in shock. She was obviously very flustered having been caught mid-robbery. She dropped my bags and fumbled around with her purse and a white plastic bag. By this time, my coworker was behind me watching all of the insanity unfold. This woman was scrambling and walking towards the door, and I said, "What's in the bag?" Thinking it's probably my stuff, and so she said, No, it's just my things, I'll show you." And so she did. I looked and I didn't see anything of mine, and so since I'm obviously in shock at the same time, I let her leave. I went into my room and it's been absolutely ransacked. I did a quick look around to see if anything had been taken. All of my electronics were still there. Then I went to the bathroom and I saw my underwear, my bikini, and my clothes shoved into my own bags randomly. Even my passport was shoved in there. Then I looked on the counter and I saw she had gotten into my medication. I'm not sure what was going through my head at the moment, other than I wanted it back. So I ran out the door to go find her. I ran to the laundry room downstairs and out to the sides of the hotels, but I didn't see her. I realized I was never going to find her. So my coworker and I went down to the lobby to tell them what happened, and then we called the police. We went back up to my room and I noticed that there was a metal bat on my bed and a little larger one of those novelty wooden bats you can get at a baseball game, but there was also a flashlight on the end. She must have left it behind in a hurry. She also left behind a necklace that must have fallen out of her bag when she was scrambling with mine. I was mostly freaking out at this point because I had thought she had gotten away with my medication that I need. The police got there and took our statements and looked around our room as well. One thing I noticed was that there was bits of drywall in the sink, and I pointed that out to the cops, but none of us really knew where it came from. We started looking at the door and the windows to see if she had pried her way in somehow, but there was nothing. So we kind of just went with the idea that she had a spare key or something, even though the hotel front desk was very adamant that she could have not had a spare. The officer that came brought 2 more officers as backup because they thought the woman might still be in the vicinity. But after our statements were taken, there was nothing else they could really do, so they left. I sat down to finally make some calls to tell some people, and as I'm on my phone, I'm thinking about the drywall in the sink, and it didn't make sense to me at all. So I'm on my phone and looking at the drywall in the mirror on the wall right above it, and then it hit me. I got my coworker and asked her to help me pull this mirror off the wall. We took the mirror down, and there's a hole just as big enough for a desperate junkie to squeeze through. I asked Brian and Rebecca if I should call the cops again to let them know we had found this, and my boss said, "There's still 2 cop cars in the parking lot." So I went down to tell them, and the female cop kind of rolled her eyes, but the young guy said, "I'll come check it out." They both came back up, looked in the hole, and found a pillow, blankets, cigarettes, clothes, and toothbrushes. This woman had been living in the wall behind my mirror for God knows how long. She had access to me in my room at all times. I know this might be hard to picture, but there was a crawl space around 2 feet wide between the 2 rows of rooms. One of the officers called the original officer to come back and take pictures of this. She explained to him what's going on, and all I hear over the radio is, "No fucking way." He comes back, takes pictures, and is just as mind blown as the rest of us. Obviously, we packed up and left immediately. What's even crazier is she's probably been there for a long time. Last time we stayed at this hotel, I would randomly smell cigarette smoke, and I assumed someone was smoking in their bathroom and it was just traveling through the vents. But nope, it seemed like a junkie was smoking just on the other side of my mirror. She had access to other rooms too. The holes in the walls were from a renovation and the hotel hadn't properly patched it up and just covered it up with mirrors. She could have been hanging out in people's rooms while they were gone too. Anyways, this was insane and I'm taking a little bit of time off. Here's a photo of the hole. And to the lady that was in between the walls, smoking cigarettes and stealing our stuff, let's not meet. This happened maybe 10 years ago when I was in my early 30s. I was standing in line at a local pharmacy to get my prescriptions. This is a small town and I'm a regular there, so they know me on sight. I was behind a couple of other people in line, and there were a couple of people behind me. I kept feeling a tickle in my hair in the back of my head, but every time I looked behind me, the guy there was a few steps back and looking at the floor. This happened several times, so by the time I was at the front of the line, the pharmacist told me she wanted to talk to me about my medication in the consultation room they had at the time. I thought this was weird because we both knew I'd been on this medication for years and would be for life, so nothing new. I get back to the room and I close the door, and she comes in from the door at the other side that leads from the pharmacy. She told me that a man behind me had been stepping forward, sticking his nose in my hair, and smelling, before stepping back and looking at the floor. This shook me pretty badly, as this is such weird behavior, especially in my little town. The pharmacy staff insisted on having me wait there until the guy was distracted, likely by another pharmacy employee, and they had a security guard walk me to my car and watch me drive off to make sure I was gone before the hair sniffer came out and saw what I was driving and what direction I was going in. I still use this pharmacy, and some of the same people still work there. I will always be grateful that they took the initiative to make sure I was safe that day. To the person who is smelling my hair, let's not meet. I'm a girl, and my mom was a horrible addict. She barely took care of me as a kid. At the time of this incident, I was around 6 or 7, so my awareness and understanding of things happening may not totally make much sense. This also happened in the 90s. One night, my mother and I were on a car ride. I wasn't sure why, but it was late at night. I'm not exactly sure what time it was, but I assume it was really late because there weren't many cars on the street and I was sleeping in the back seat. I don't even remember getting in the car. My mom drove up to some sketchy house and left me in the car for what felt like forever. Suddenly, the car doors swung open and someone violently grabbed me by my arm and yanked me out of the car. I started screaming and crying until the man that grabbed me looked me in the eyes and said, "Be quiet and don't try to run or I'll kill you." He had a scruffy beard and he looked like a madman. I was scared to death, so I listened. He held me tight by my arm, shut the car door, and walked with me down the street. I looked back at the house my mom was in, hoping my mom would come out at the last second and save me. I looked at the house as long as I could as a man dragged me further and further away. As we walked down the street, I wanted to cry, but I was in shock and fear. I didn't know what to do. If I sniffled or cried, the man would tighten his grip and yell at me. I couldn't even explain how scared or confused I was. We walked for a little while and ended up in the projects. The projects were a bunch of buildings crammed together in a shitty neighborhood. We walked into one of the buildings and walked up a flight of stairs. My legs and feet hurt like hell, but I was too scared to stop moving or complain. We walked up another flight of stairs when I saw a random guy smoking a cigarette in the stairway. Then, without warning, the guy that kidnapped me fell to the ground. It happened so fast. I didn't know how the kidnapper fell to the ground so fast, but the next thing I remember is the cigarette guy was punching and kicking the kidnapper in his head and face. The kidnapper was out cold. Cigarette guy picked up the kidnapper by the back of his jacket and threw him down the stairs. You have no idea how scary and violent it is to see an unconscious man fall down the stairs. To this day, I still have a fear of falling downstairs. He was bleeding everywhere. I still have no idea how cigarette guy knew to help me out, but I'm glad he did. Maybe he could see tears in my eyes, maybe he just picked up on the fact that something had a bad vibe, but he acted instantly. The first second he could, he attacked my would-be kidnapper. Cigarette guy starts pacing back and forth, swearing at himself, gritting his teeth and clenching his fists. I thought he was mad at me, so I started to cry. He looked at me and said, Okay, shut up. He had an attitude, so I listened to him out of fear. I wasn't as scared of the cigarette guy as much as the bearded guy, but I was still in fear of him. He started to ask me questions with an attitude. Why are you out this late? Where are your parents? Why would you talk to strangers? I was in so much shock and confusion I couldn't answer the man's questions correctly. He asked if I knew my way home, and I told him I didn't. I told him a broken story about what happened, and somehow with that information I gave, he knew where my mom's car was. The only thing I remember about the road is passing a house with Christmas lights on it, despite Christmas already being over. I think he knew the area well enough and figured out where I needed to go. But honestly, I don't even remember telling him about the Christmas lights. Anyways, he told me he would take me back if I promised over and over again that I wouldn't tell the police that I saw him or anyone that looked like him, and made me promise that I wouldn't tell the police anything. He had an attitude, and I didn't care what he asked me. I just wanted to go back to my mom, so I agreed. I followed him down the stairs. The bearded guy was laying on the ground, bleeding at the bottom of the stairs that cigarette guy threw him down. He wasn't moving at all. For all I knew, he could have been dead. And I hope now that he was. Cigarette guy stepped over the bearded guy and I followed. We walked outside and cigarette guy looked around all panicky. I remember him telling me, "The police don't like me." We walked out of the projects and my feet still hurt. Cigarette guy was walking fast in a panic and I had to basically jog to keep up with him. I started crying and he asked me what was wrong and I told him that my feet hurt, and I remember him sucking his teeth and picking me up with an attitude. He awkwardly cradled me in both arms. He walked down the road for a moment, then I remember him swearing and running behind a house or a building. A cop car was driving down the road. He put me down and told me to run to the police car. I tried to run, but my legs could barely move at this point and I was terrified. The cop car kept driving down the road without seeing me before I could even get remotely close to it. He kept swearing to himself as he picked me up again and ran down the street. He took me behind a lot of houses and hid from every cop that drove by. I assumed now that the police were looking for me. He carried me in both arms, running fast down the road when I saw my mom in her car in the distance. She was surrounded by police. Cigarette guy put me down and told me to run to the police. I got so excited the pain in my legs disappeared. He put me down and ran away. I ran towards the police and my mom. My mom picked me up and hugged me tight. The police started to ask me and my mom questions. I don't remember too much about their questions, but I remember my mom telling the police some convoluted story that just didn't make any sense. She basically told me not to say anything, and I didn't say much but cried a whole bunch. We went home. Days later, my dad picked me up and knew something was wrong. I told him everything, and from that point on, I never lived with my mom again. When I grew up, I had time to think about that day, and I never forgave my mother. Not too long ago, I asked my dad what he remembers about the situation, and he told me what he thinks happened from what I explained to him from years ago. He said my mom was on a drug binge, I got kidnapped, someone saved me, but the person that saved me had warrants and wasn't mad at me. He was just frustrated with the whole situation that he had to deal with. Imagine being a criminal on the run, and now you have a kidnapped girl with you, and you just beat a guy half to death. If he would have gotten caught with me, he could have gone to jail for my kidnapping. With my mom lying and me being in shock and confused, I wouldn't be able to tell them that the man helped me because while it was all happening, I didn't even notice he was helping me. To the man that saved me, thanks. To the man that tried to kidnap me, let's not meet. This happened around 2 days ago. I live in a small city in Romania, around 30,000 inhabitants. Romania isn't exactly known for their tolerance of gay people. It's not as bad as other places, such as Russia, but the situation is definitely not rosy here either. I get on Grindr and meet a guy, 18 years old apparently. The guy didn't have a picture of his face as his profile picture, because it's too dangerous. He had a picture of a rose drawing. Most guys on Grindr here don't have any pictures of themselves. We talked for a bit and I really liked the guy. And then we finally accept to exchange face pictures. I sent him a selfie of myself and he sends me a picture of a guy from our city. He was cute and I really liked him, so I told him, "Hey, I saw you around the city. Didn't know you were gay too." We talked and finally arranged to meet. I had some errands to run at the tailor shop. My cousin's bachelorette party is coming next week and I need to adjust my favorite shirt. So I asked him to meet me in the front of the tailor shop. The building in which the tailor shop is located has 4 stories. The ground floor is a clothes shop, which my aunt works at. The first floor is a storage room. The 3rd floor is a barber salon, and the 4th floor was a tailor shop. I go to the tailor shop, and then go to the clothes shop on the ground floor to visit my aunt and see how she's doing. As I was looking out the window of the clothes shop, I noticed there were 5 men, all of them looking to be about in their late 20s behind the building. None of them was the guy I got a picture of, and none of them even looked remotely close to what the guy looked like. I texted the guys I was supposed to meet and asked him if he made it to the tailor shop. As soon as I sent the message, one of the 5 guys' phones lit up and he started texting. As soon as he stopped texting, I got a notification from Grindr. "I'm behind the tailor shop. I went there to smoke so no one would see me. Come smoke with me." I was terrified as I realized I wasn't going to meet the guy in the picture. He tries to get me to go behind the tailor shop, and I try to get him to go to the side of it. There were no windows to the side of the building, so after a few tries, He agreed to meet at the side of the tailor shop. All 5 guys went to the side of the tailor shop. I peeked my head from the door, looked left and right, and as soon as I saw my way was clear, I ran for it. So Grinder cutie, let's not meet.